A story is told that Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva in Jerusalem, once visited the home of the Rav in the old Yishuv in Yerushalayim by the name of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. When he came into the house of Rabbi Sonnenfeld, he was told that Rabbi Sonnenfeld was not there. And when he asked where was he, the members of the home told him that Rabbi Sonnenfeld went to immerse in a mikveh. When Rabbi Sonnenfeld came back home, Rabbi Meltzer asked, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, since when do you go to the mikveh so often? You're not a chassid. Chassidim are known to go to mikveh every morning before prayers. So why are you going to the mikveh so often? Rabbi Sonnenfeld said, the Talmud tells us in the Tractate of Brachis, page 47b, that a ger shemo v'lo taval, a potential convert that circumcised himself, but yet he did not enter into the mikveh, that potential convert is still not Jewish. What allows the convert to become Jewish? By the fact that the convert enters into the mikveh. So too, if the mikveh is so powerful that a person that is not Jewish goes into the mikveh, now that person becomes Jewish. Said Rabbi Sonnenfeld, can you imagine how much more the mikveh can accomplish for someone already who is Jewish and part of the holy nation? By him going into the mikveh truly brings him to greater heights. The question is, what is the mystery of the mikveh? What makes the mikveh so powerful? And what gives the mikveh the ability to transform people? I would like to answer this question on 5 different levels. On the level of pshat, the simple level, and the level of remez, the hint, drush, homiletics, soid, esoteric, and also the 5th level, which is Casillas. On a simple level, on the level of pshat, we find that the Chinuch explains on the mitzvah of the Rambam. When the Rambam says in this week's parsha, where it says in the Torah, "V'rochatz b'mayim es kol b'soroi," in Leviticus 15:16, the Torah says that you shall immerse all his flesh in water. Says the Rambam in Mitzvah 109, positive commandment, that we are commanded to immerse in the waters of a mikveh and thereby be purified from whichever form of impurity one is in. And the Rambam goes on to say that there's no obligation for one to immerse in the mikveh. There's no mitzvah for one to immerse in the mikveh. However, if one wants to be purified from his impurity, then he has to go into a mikveh. So comes along the chinuch, and the chinuch says that even though one doesn't have to go into the mikveh, however, a chassid, one who is pious, and one who is anshe meiser, a person who has the yoke of heaven, would not remain in a state of impurity, but would immerse in the mikveh. And then the chinuch goes on to say, what is the definition? And what is the reason why the mikveh purifies? And he gives 2 explanations. Number 1, he says, just like water washes off a person's stain, if a person has dirt on his hands or dirt on one's clothing, water washes away this dirt. So too spiritually, the waters of the mikveh wash away one's spiritual stains. Number 2, he says that the world, before the world was created, the world was submerged in water. And similarly, before a child comes out of his mother's womb, the child is also submerged in water. And therefore, when a person enters into the mikveh, a person enters into the state of the world yet unborn. And when a person emerges from the mikveh, that individual is now reborn, and that person experiences rebirth. That is the simple interpretation of the mikveh. That is pshat. What is the remez? What is the hint? This the Rambam himself says in the end of the laws of Mikveh. The Rambam over there says that if a person resolves in his heart to purify his soul, once he makes this resolution in his heart and he brings his soul into the pure waters, he becomes pure. In other words, the Rambam says that these pure waters are Mei Hadas HaTohar, represent the pure waters of the Torah. Once a person immerses in the waters of the mikveh, it is similar to immersing oneself into the waters of the Torah. And just like you have to immerse yourself totally in the mikveh, that the mikveh waters cover your entire body, you can't immerse yourself halfway, or everything but your head, or everything but one hair, or everything but one finger. You have to immerse totally in the waters of the mikveh to become pure. So too, when a person resolves that he wants to leave behind all the narishkeiten, all the folly of the world, and he truly wants to change, by the fact that he immerses totally into the waters of the Torah, that is the way the individual will be purified. And that is the remez, that is the hint of the mikveh. And therefore the Rebbe explains that that is why a mikveh, according to Torah law, as the Talmud explains, that the rabbis came along and said that a mikveh needs to be mem sa'ah, 40 sa'ah, which is a Talmudic measurement, which is the amount of water that as kol b'sarei, the entire flesh, will enter into. Why 40 sa'ah? Because we know the Torah was given in 40 days. Moses was in heaven, and after 40 days he received the Torah. He received the Torah from God. So 40 is the number of the Torah. And therefore, by entering into the mikveh, which is 40 sa'ah, this is a hint to the study of the Torah that was given in 40 days. The first luchos was given in 40 days. And the second luchos, the second tablets, were also given in 40 days. And that's why we find that the oral law starts with the letter mem and concludes with the letter mem. It begins with the words me'i masai, which is the letter mem, which is the gematria of 40. And it concludes with the letter mem bashalom, which also equals the number 40. By the fact that a person immerses himself totally into the mikveh, into the holy waters of Torah, says the Rambam, then tahar, that person becomes pure. The story told that a student of the Goyin Rab Shachna of Lublin told his master that he had a difficulty focusing when he was studying Torah. So his teacher told him that he should be nizhar, which means he should be very scrupulous and stringent when it comes to the mitzvah of immersing in the mikveh. And by the fact that he would be stringent when it comes to the obligation of immersing in the mikveh, then two things will happen. Number one, his mind will be sharpened for the study of Torah. And number two, his heart will open to the gateways of prayer. These are the two benefits of going into the mikveh, because the mikveh itself represents the knowledge of Torah. This is the remez, this is the hint of the mikveh. What is drush, the homiletics? The homiletics is how we interpret the pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'rochatz b'mayim es kol basarei." You shall wash in your water the entire flesh. In other words, that you have to enter into the water, into a body of water that covers your entire flesh. How much water is that? Says the Talmud, this is 1 cubit by 1 cubit by 3 cubits high, which also is the same amount of 40 sa'ah. Now, why is it 1 cubit by 1 cubit by 3 cubits high? Says Tosfos in the Tractate of Eruvin that in truth, that is only up to one's neck. It's not up to one's head. And yet the Torah says that you have to enter into water that will cover the entire body. It doesn't cover the entire body. It only covers up to the neck. So the answer is that you have to squeeze in a little bit. You got to push your head down to go into the mikveh. And the Rebbe explains what's the reason behind this. Because the entire reason that a person came to sin was because he lost his head. If he would have been thinking with his head on his shoulders, he never would have come to sin. He never would have come to impurity. And that is why the waters are up to the neck. As the Gemara says, Ein Adam over Aveira Elim Kein Nichnas Beiruach Shtus, that a person does not commit a sin unless a spirit of folly enters into him. Because if you would be in your right mind, there's no way that a Jew could sin. A mitzvah means connection. Every time you do a sin, you're severing your connection with God, who is infinite. So therefore, the severing is an infinite separation. Why would you want to do that? The only reason is a spirit of folly entered into you. In other words, you lost your mind, you lost your head. So go into the mikveh now. Put your head into the mikveh, and now you will put your head into Torah. You won't do these foolish things. This is the drush, the homiletics of mikveh. What is soid? What is the esoteric meaning of mikveh? Our rabbis tell us that before a person immerses in the mikveh, the Baal Shem Tov says that a person should meditate and realize that his body, his guf, is a kli cheres. His body is an earthenware vessel. And the law is that an earthenware vessel cannot become pure by going into the mikveh. If an earthenware vessel becomes impure, the only way you can refine it is through breaking it, and then it shall become pure. So first and foremost, we have to break ourselves. We have to realize that we're unworthy of becoming pure. And that is the introduction of entering into the mikveh. And that is why the Rebbe says that the word tevilah, immersion, to immerse in the mikveh, are the same letters as habitul, which means self-nullification. That you become nullified before God. You realize that you're totally insignificant. And then the Baal Shem Tov goes on to say, when you enter into the mikveh, what should one meditate? That the floor of the mikveh is Shem Adnai, the name of God, who has mastery over the universe. The four walls of the mikveh represent the tetragrammaton, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Havaya, the four letters of God's name, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. And the Gag of the mikveh, the roof of the mikveh, this represents Shem Ehyeh, the name of God, that I will be where I will be, which is the essence and the highest of all the names. In other words, according to Soid, according to Kabbalah, according to the esoteric level of Torah, the mikveh is not only something that cleanses one from their sins, but the mikveh has powers of purity to elevate a person higher and higher. And this we find by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, that on the day of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, when the holiest Jew, the Kohen Gadol, went into the holiest place on earth, to the Holy of Holies, he immersed 5 times in the mikveh, 5 different times throughout the day. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, did not go into the mikveh because he was impure. On the contrary, we know that he had to separate 7 days from his family and stay in seclusion so that he would be in a state of purity. After he became pure for these 7 days, then he entered into the mikveh 5 times. Because each time he entered into the mikveh throughout that day, he ascended to another level of holiness, another level of tahara, another level of kedusha. And this explains the Rebbe why the Baal Shem Tov went so often to the mikveh. It was in the merit that the Baal Shem Tov immersed very often in the mikveh that he had the zchus, that he had the merit to have tremendous Ruach HaKodesh, tremendous divine spirit, and he was able to make ascents into the holy chambers within the supernal spheres. He was able to enter into the many holy chambers of the Mashiach and other holy souls, and he was able to perform many, many miracles. All of this came about because of the fact that he was nizar, he was very meticulous when it came to the concept of immersion in a mikveh. This is the concept of soid, the esoteric level. Now we come to the 5th level. That is a level of Chassidus. What is the reason, according to Chassidus, that one immerses in the mikveh? We can understand this with the following statement in the Talmud. The Talmud says, "Ma mikveh mitares atameim, afa kodesh baruch hu mitares Yisrael." Just like a mikveh makes pure somebody that is impure, so too God purifies the Jewish people. That's the statement in the end of the Tractate of Yuma. And the Rebbe asks a very simple question. We need a proof from mikveh that God can purify Israel. God is everything. God is the omnipresent. God is beyond time and space. We need a proof from mikveh that God can purify the Jewish people. On the contrary, the opposite is true. We should say, just like God purifies Israel, so too a mikveh can purify one that is impure. Says the Rebbe an amazing thing. The Rebbe says, what is the quality of a mikveh? A person immerses in the mikveh, and the waters of the mikveh must touch the flesh of the body, the entire body, and there may not be any intervening substances. If there's a substance or an object or paint or dirt that is separating the person in the mikveh and the water, the person is not pure. Because the water of the mikveh itself, without any intervening substance, must purify the person. Says the Gemara, just like the mikveh water purifies the person, God himself, without any intermediary, purifies the Jew. In other words, a person might think, if a Jew sinned, either accidentally or all the more so purposely, and now he's in a state of impurity, physically and spiritually. So God, because of his love for the Jewish people, wants the Jew to be purified. So what does God do? He should send an angel. he should send a shaliach, an emissary. He should send a rabbi. He should send a gabbai, a beadle in the synagogue, and let that person talk to the individual and tell him how terrible it is to sin and how beautiful it is to return to God, inspire him, clean him off from all of his impurities, wash off the dirt from his body, and then he should bring him to the rabbi, and then the rabbi will bring him to the angel, and then the angel will bring him to God, and God will really elevate that person. That would be the normal order of events. Comes along the Talmud and says, no, just like the water itself touches the body of the impure person, so too God himself, because of his love for every Jew, God himself touches the body of the Jew and purifies the body himself without any intermediary, without any angel, without any rabbi, without any shaliach intermediary. And this explains an amazing question. If you have an egg, and the egg is impure, and this egg that is impure falls into a room with 1,000,000 pounds of tahara, of holy food, all the holy food in that room becomes impure. We don't say that 1,000,000 pounds of tahara, of holy food, will nullify the one egg that is impure. It's true when it comes to milk and meat, for example. It's true that if you have 60 times more milk than the drop of meat gravy that falls into the pot, it will nullify that gravy 60 times, 1 to 60. That is only true by isur, something which is forbidden to eat, either because it's not kosher or because it's a mixture of meat and milk. So 1 to 60 it becomes nullified. However, when it comes to impurity, one egg of impurity does not become nullified by 60 eggs of purity. 60 holy eggs will not nullify one unholy egg. Even 1,000,000 holy eggs will not nullify one egg that is unholy, that is impure. Yet, the mikveh is the opposite. 1,000,000 impure people can go into the mikveh, and the mikveh is still holy. That is the power of the mikveh. That all the unholiness in the world cannot defile the holiness of the mikveh. That's what Casillas says. Why? Because God himself is in the waters of the mikveh. And God is infinite. And because God is infinite, no impurity in the world can defile the holiness of the waters of the mikveh. And all of this is why? Because of God's love for the Jewish people. Knowing that, being that the Jews find themselves in a world that could be imperfect and a world that could be unholy, God created a space within this world that is beyond space. And in this space that is beyond space, you can go and find sanctuary and find purity. And nothing in the world can defile you if you are surrounded by these 4 walls of purity. So in short, what is the power of the mikveh? What does Casillas say that makes the mikveh so special? When one enters into the mikveh, he's coming face to face with God. And because one is coming face to face with God, no impurity in the world can defile that purity of the mikveh. The word mikveh means hope. The mikveh is a place of hope. It's a place of healing. It's a place that brings about healthy children. It brings about a healthy parnasa, healthy livelihood. And that's why it's important before you immerse in the mikveh, if it's not Shabbos or Yom Tif, to put money in the pushka. That increases the blessings of the mikveh. And the mikveh is not only for women. Yes, women, married women should go once a month, but Hasidic men try to go every day, and at least to go once a week before Shabbos and before major holidays. For the mikveh brings purity to yourself and to the world. So, to give a summary, entering into the mikveh, number one, is rebirth, because you are entering into the state of the world yet unborn. Number two, mayim, water, is a metaphor for Torah. By entering into the Torah, submerging into the Torah, this brings about purity. Number three, the mikveh not only cleanses one from sin and impurity, but it also brings about greater levels of purity and holiness. And finally, entering into the mikveh is coming face to face with God. And so in the merit of mikveh, that is so holy, that according to Jewish law, you have a right to sell a synagogue to build a mikveh. And therefore, by increasing the building of mikveh, and by increasing the going to the mikveh, this will no doubt bring about purity to the world. As we are told that when Mashiach will come, God says, "V'zarakti aleichem," I will sprinkle upon you the holy waters and purify you. And furthermore, the entire world will become a mikveh. As it says that the knowledge of God will fill the world like the waters cover the sea.